Go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Marin Science Seminar. This evening, we are so pleased to have a local environmental activism and progress resource goddess come to speak with us. Not only is she close to our heart here at Terra Linda because of her seminal involvement and inspiration for the Marin School of Environmental Leadership, but you're going to hear all about some fabulous positive amendments to our community and our understanding of the current climate crisis. So, without further ado, let's please give a warm local welcome to Cyane Dandridge.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody here. This is great. Thank you for coming out on this kind of cold, but luckily not rainy evening. Very good. So I am going to talk to you about building and unbuilding a climate change crisis. Really what I'm going to focus on is how our buildings are one of the main causes of climate change. Before I do that, I want to just give you a little bit of background about my history so you can get a sense of how I got here. So I went to high school on a farm and very project-based learning, the Putney School in Putney, Vermont. And when I was there, I actually built a house. So I was involved in building when I was at the Putney School. I built it with another woman, just the two of us, over a summer, and we lived in the house the following year. And it was a passive solar house. It was built with all reused materials. We went to the local dump and got most of our materials from the local dump. I didn't realize at that point that I was building a green building. All I knew is that we didn't have enough money to buy all of the materials that we needed, and that was the cheapest way to do it. So that's a good lesson right there, is that green building, a lot of people think that green buildings and environmental buildings cost a lot more money, and they don't. That's actually a misnomer. So that's my first lesson in green building before there was such a thing as green building. So it was quite a long time. It was 1984, so it was a while ago. Then I went on to Reed College, where I studied physics, and my thesis for my physics degree was actually looking at the effect of the sun coming through the atmosphere. So I was trying to understand, as the sun came through our atmosphere, what are the different energy levels when it's coming through cloud cover, or when it's coming through smog, or when it's just direct sunlight. So really trying to understand what are those differences in energy levels, and can we design solar panels so that they can answer to those differences. So if you have solar panels in Portland, Oregon, which is where I went to college, could we design solar panels that actually were good in Oregon, where there's a lot of cloud cover, versus down in California where there's not. There's a lot of sun. So that was what my thesis was at Reed College. And then I went on to MIT after that, after taking some time and kind of traveling around the world a little bit. Went to MIT and I got my degree in building technology. And so building technology at MIT, the degree is energy efficiency in buildings. So what I really focus on is, and a large part of what this talk is on, is energy efficiency in building. My thesis there was looking at that point, what was called other in any kind of energy use analysis in buildings, which was office equipment. Really all of the electronics and everything else fell into other. Now, as we'll see in a later slide, it actually gets its own category. Our use in that sector has grown tremendously. Just a side note, when I was in college, we had maybe 4 or 5 pieces of electronic equipment in my college dorm room. When you guys go to college, you'll have over 20 pieces of electronic equipment in your dorm room. So just thinking about that, just that plug load, basically one thing plugged in, how much do you think something plugged in, how much energy do you think it uses? Oh, come on, guess. How much do you think it uses? 20 watts. How much, anybody else? How much do you think like a DVD player or anything that's plugged in? Not a computer, but anything else that's plugged in.
For how long?
Well, just the power, not the energy. So how much power do you think, any of your cell phone chargers, how much power do you think they use?
15 watts.
15 watts. Anybody else? That's high. It's
a kilowatt.
No, that's a lot. Oh my God, I hope not. Just think about how many of those are plugged in your house right now, those little boxes, right? Those little plugs. They're all about 5 watts, 5 to 15 watts. It could be as much as 15. So if they're all plugged in all the time, just think of that impact that that box has. You're not using them all the time, right? They're just plugged in. They're waiting for you to go and plug them in. It's kind of ridiculous, right?
I thought the load on them was 0 when there was no device in the charger.
No.
Most of them are passively.
No. Most of them use 5 to 15 watts. There's some that don't, but most of them use 5 to just plugged in, not being used. We've tested it. We've gone around. There's lots of tests. It's ridiculous. It's insane. So you're going to have over 20 of those little things plugged in your dorm room. They're all going to be using that much. When I was in college, it was about 4. So you just think about the growth in just that in terms of energy use from when I was in college to when you guys are going to be going to college. It's a lot. So I went from MIT into working for the EPA, and I actually designed a lot. Do you guys know Energy Star? Have you heard of Energy Star? So I designed a lot of the original Energy Star programs when I was at EPA. So the computer program, the printer program, all of the initial Energy Star. I was one of the first employees actually in that department, which is kind of fun. And then went from there, was hired into a small nonprofit, and then I started my own nonprofit, which is the one that I work for now, Strategic Energy Innovations. And I've done a lot of work with communities through this nonprofit. And so the focus of my work right now is to try and understand in communities, how can I help a community reduce their climate impact? That's the core of what I do. And really, how communities can reduce their climate impact is by looking at buildings. That's really what it comes down to. So, when I'm talking about climate change, how many of you guys know what climate change is? Okay. All right, so how many of you could actually explain to me what climate change is? Taryn.
Oh,
explain to me what climate change is.
It's when the climate is changing around the world.
Oh, come on, Taryn. Take it serious. Use this picture to explain climate
So what
change.
happens is greenhouse gases, which we are emitting, are going into the Earth's atmosphere, and the greenhouse layer is expanding, trapping more greenhouse gases, more and more gases are like.
You got it right.
Up,
You got it right.
and then sunlight goes in, heats it up, and instead of it going away, bouncing back into space, it gets trapped in here and keeps cycling over and over and slowly heating us up more and more and more.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. Did he miss anything, anybody, do you think?
Maybe what the gases are?
Okay.
Is it all gases?
Good. That's good. So, greenhouse gases, what are greenhouse gases? Anybody know?
Carbon dioxide?
Carbon dioxide is one of them. What's another one?
Methane.
Methane. Good job. All the Marin Cell students. Good job. What are some other ones?
Nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide. So we got nitrous oxide, methane, and carbon dioxide. Those are the 3 main greenhouse gases. How do we get those greenhouse gases? Where do they come from? Anybody? Nathan?
Farts.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Cows. Yep, you're right. That's actually one of the premier causes of greenhouse of methane, which is actually not farts, Nathan, but they are. No. Come on, Nathan. You've been in my classes before. Taryn, they're not farts. They're the gas, but they're coming from.
Burp.
Thank you.
I said that.
Okay, so most of our greenhouse gas emissions from methane, due to methane, actually come from cows eating corn. Corn gets into their stomachs, and cows aren't made to process corn. They're not supposed to eat corn. They're not animals that know how to eat corn. So their stomachs react, and they get all gassy, and they burp, and they emit methane. And so that's how a lot of our greenhouse gases come from that. So anyway, I'm going to go on. One of the primary ways that we are causing this greenhouse effect is by burning fossil fuels. Yeah?
I'm sorry, but why don't they just not feed corn to cows?
That's a really, really good question. Can anybody guess the answer? Why do you think,
Corn's cheap.
Corn's cheap? Well, grass would be cheaper, right? You don't have to buy it. Right?
Government subsidies.
Government subsidy, but still grass would be cheaper. Yeah, why do you think?
Well, if you're going to feed your cows on grass, you have to actually have pastures, and keeping up nice pastures actually takes a lot of time and energy.
They actually do pretty well on free range with very little grass. But that's a really good answer. That's an awesome answer. And in most cases, you're kind of leading to what the answer is. Taryn, you got an idea?
Fat cows.
Yes, you're right. Fat cows. When you get a steak, how many of you guys eat meat, eat steak? Okay, so when you get a steak, do you like it to be kind of tough, or do you like it to be really fat and juicy? Okay, corn makes meat fat and juicy. Grass makes meat not as fat and juicy, unless you have really nice, lush green grasses, which is hard to come by, right? Which is why it's a good answer. Okay, so we'll move on from that. So the primary way we're getting these greenhouse gas emissions going up into our atmosphere is from burning fossil fuels. You guys know what fossil fuels are? Who does not know what a fossil fuel is? Okay, good. So it's by burning fossil fuels. Is the greenhouse effect, is that good or bad?
Good. Very
Ember, is it good or bad?
It's not necessarily bad, but when it's as, like, I don't know, bad it is now.
Yes, you are right. It's actually, without the greenhouse effect, we would not be alive. There would be nothing. It would be like we were out in outer space. We would be either super cold, super hot. We would be completely exposed, right? We need the greenhouse. We need that layer. Those greenhouse gases are absolutely imperative for life on Earth. We cannot live without them. But what we're doing is misusing it. We're adding more and more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and causing big problems. Okay, so what are the problems that we're causing? Here's a really kind of scary list. If we keep going the way that we've been going, we're looking at $3 billion in losses from just not enough water for growing food. We're looking at drought. We're looking at sea levels rising. We're looking at extinction of freshwater fish, $2 billion impact because of wildfires, snowpack reduced by 75%, 75% of our forests gone. This is huge. I mean, this is huge impacts. This is just some of the stuff that we're looking at. There is a report that was prepared recently, last year, that kind of went through this on and on and on list. I just put a couple of things up there.
Is that damage to California or to
This
the
is
U.S.?
just California.
Just California.
Just what I'm looking at in California, yeah. So, and we live in a gorgeous place, right? We happen to be surrounded by a lot of water. So what's going to happen to us if we get a 1 to 2 foot sea level rise?
Flooding.
Oh, it's really hard to see this. Can you turn that down for just a minute? So you can see all the way up here, all the way around here. This is all, it's not just flooded. I'm not talking about flooding. This is underwater. This is not flood. This is gone. Okay, all this here, I'll show you another slide. This is our community right here locally. So if you see here, this is where we if you're in Marin, this is McGinnis is right here. This is the Civic Center right there. This is, so there's the Richmond Bridge. So this is Trader Joe's, all around there. It's underwater. So when we're talking sea level rise, we're talking, it's pretty devastating. Okay, so how are we causing this? What is creating all of these greenhouse gas emissions? So if you look at this, transportation looks like it's one of the biggest issues, and it is. It's a huge impact. Transportation alone is 34% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. And now I'm talking U.S.-wide, so national. Electric power, the production of electric power is 40%. Residential, commercial, and industrial buildings themselves are 27%. But then when you look at that electric power is being used by buildings. So in reality, buildings account for 67% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. It's a huge impact. So buildings, thinking about how we use buildings, how we make buildings, what we do with buildings, and then plus, some of the primary transportation costs are us going to and from buildings. So again, if you have to think about buildings when you're trying to think about climate protection. 41% of the primary energy consumption comes from building, 30% of our raw materials use, so not even just talking about energy, when we get into like the total impact that buildings have on our environment, it's huge impact that our buildings have on our environment. One of the ways that they use energy is during construction. 87% of the total greenhouse gas emissions are from the building materials themselves. One of the things when you're looking at buildings, you have to think of buildings as systems. So buildings are not just about, okay, we're going to build a box and yeah, whatever we have, we're going to go out and buy a whole bunch of material and build this box. When people build buildings now, if they do it right, they have to think about reusing material, getting materials that are made in a sustainable manner, so not just going down and clear-cutting forests, but doing it in a way that you're taking one tree out at a time so that the forest can still continue to grow and maintain. So you really have to think about what your building is, how it's being built, what's being used to build the building, and then how it's being used. On average, Americans spend 90% of their time indoors. That's a pretty crazy fact. 90% of their time, they're inside a building. It's kind of sad if you think about it. I mean, wouldn't you love to be just outside most of the time? I mean, that would be so much nicer. So what are the 3 top energy uses in a building? What do you guys think?
Heat.
Heat,
Air conditioning.
lights, air conditioning, heating, cooling, lighting. Woo! That's it. Good job. So, this is how you can see it. So, it's hard to see this. Maybe I'll turn it off. So this is a total energy consumption. I'm not going to get into this. This is a messy slide. It has a lot of different uses. But one of the things I do want to point out, which I said earlier, so here this is 5% electronics, 2% computers, 3% other. When I was doing my research, and I did a huge amount of research in this, the total amount was 2% was another. Now, and that included computers and electronics. So you have this growing sector, and the reason I point this out, you can put the light back on. The reason why I point this out is because you guys are all using all of those electronics. How many of you have stuff at home that's on in your bedrooms and you're here? Be honest. Okay. Look around the room. That's a lot. Think about what you guys could be doing by not having that on. It's important to think about this. One of the things I'm going to say at the end, I'll point out. Who could tell me the 5 R's? Not Taryn. I know Taryn knows this. Yeah.
Reuse, reduce, recycle,
You got it so far. 2 more.
rot.
Rot. What's the 5th? No. I like it. Mia, do you know it?
You just said it. She just said it.
Okay, what did Mia say, Taryn?
Rethink.
Rethink. Rethink. Okay, it's, yeah.
What is the biggest section in the residential?
The biggest section in the residential is space heating.
Space heating?
Yeah, space heating, the second biggest is water heating, then space cooling.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
When you hear people say that 20% of electrical use is for lighting and 20% of electrical use in California is for water, how does that fit into the numbers you're giving?
You're talking about, when you're saying it's 20% is for lighting,
It's for delivering light in the state.
delivering light in buildings in the state.
Yeah.
So for water, what I would say for water is that would include pumping. Actually, our processing and delivery of water is our single biggest energy use in the state of California. And that's because we do a lot of pumping and we do a lot of treatment of water in California. So all of that water that's being fed down into the Central Valley, a lot of that's being pumped down there, and that's a huge energy impact. And so when you guys are thinking about, why do we turn off our faucets when we're brushing our teeth? How many of you guys do that? Oh, that's so good. Good. Awesome. So when you're doing that, it's not just about saving water, it's also about saving energy. And it's not just energy because you're heating the water, it's also because you need to pump that water to get that water out of your faucet. So just thinking about the complexity of all of these different systems, I think, is really important. Okay, so this is I love this slide. I'm sorry I'm such a geek like this. So this is a really interesting slide. You guys can't read it, but I will read it for you. Why are we using so much energy? Well, energy is really, really cheap. I mean, it might not seem so, but it's 5 times more expensive when you go over to Europe. And the reason is because of our government subsidies. So, for any renewable energy source, the subsidy for renewable energy source is $12.2, I think it's $billion. I can't really even read it. So $12.2 billion. For ethanol, which really uses more energy than it gives to any source, ethanol is not a good energy source. Still, it's being subsidized 16.8. So far we've gone from 12.2 with renewables up to 16.8 with ethanol. With oil and coal, $70.2 billion. So oil and coal is hugely subsidized. So when we talk about how solar is more expensive than not going solar, yeah, it is for us, but that's because it's not subsidized. So it's a whole lot easier to just keep spending energy because our government subsidizes it. It's a really important thing to keep in mind. Yeah?
Could you explain the language of subsidies? Because I'm not sure that...
That's a good point. I'm sorry. Thank you. So subsidy, do you guys know what subsidy means?
No.
Okay. So it basically means that the government is giving oil companies money to bring down the cost of oil. So our U.S. government gives oil companies money. They give them tax cuts. They give them all kinds of ways to have them artificially reduce the cost of oil to us so that it makes it cheaper for us to drive our cars, to turn on our lights, to run things in our buildings.
How much of the cost is the government doing subsidize?
A lot more. I mean, there's $70.2. I have another slide on that. I didn't bring it, so I don't know. That's a really, really good question, though. Yeah.
And that number doesn't include the military cost of the oil.
No, that doesn't. No. So when we go to war, like we've done over oil, think about the billions and billions and billions of dollars that we spend to go to war, primarily because of oil and because of our fight over oil rates. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous what we do because of oil. The thing that we overlook is that energy efficiency is an amazing resource. And it's a resource that we don't look at. Solar is really sexy. Solar is awesome. I mean, everybody should get solar. It's so cool. It is. It's a super sexy. Everybody, who doesn't want solar, right? Who here has solar on the rooftops? Who would like to have solar on the rooftops? Okay, now let me ask a different question. Who has an energy efficient home? Who would like to have an energy efficient home? Not as many. But see, I mean, it's just not as sexy. It's not as cool. So, but energy efficiency is by far the most cost-effective, easiest, best way of going way before you go with any renewable energy sources. So looking at energy efficiency first is really the way to go. I mean, you invest $500 billion and you're going to save $1.2 trillion. That's what it's looking. I mean, just that investment alone, when you invest in any kind of energy source to try and get jobs, I mean, we're creating 900,000 jobs just from that small investment. When we look at putting in that much money into like energy production, like going out on oil rigs and digging up oil, you're going to produce, I think it was 9,000 jobs. So you look at, that's 100,000 difference, 100 times more jobs from investing in energy efficiency. So when you're looking now at the sheer, the jobs issue that we're faced with right now, we shouldn't be doing more with fracking and with oil production and with all the kind of stuff that we're doing. We should be doing more with investing in energy efficiency. All right, you know what fracking is? Do you guys know what fracking is?
No.
Okay, I'm not going to describe it because it's not part of my talk. And I'm going to write that.
Google that one.
Google it. Look it up. It's cool. All right. So when we're talking about needing to reduce our carbon dioxide, right, all of those greenhouse gas emissions I talked about at the beginning, we need to reduce them. Otherwise, we're going to head into those droughts and those nobody's going to go skiing anymore because there's not going to be any snowpack, all of those kinds of issues. When you guys get older, you might not be able to ski in Tahoe. How many of you guys ski? Do you guys like to go up to the snow? It's fun, right? Can you imagine going up there and there never being any snow? Unless you go way, way, way up to the top of the mountain. That would be horrible. But that's the kind of thing that we could face if we don't do something about this. So, buildings, just looking at buildings energy efficiency, we can reduce, just using technology, stuff that exists right now, that we can do right now, we can reduce our total greenhouse gas emissions by 25%. Easy. Easy, easy, easy. But that means that everybody has to do it. So all you guys that raised your hand that said that they would like to have an energy efficient home, you guys should go home and bug your parents and get them to put in those light bulbs and to insulate their attics and to do all that stuff that makes them energy efficient. And you should help them. Taryn insulated our floor last summer. Way to embarrass your kid, yes. All right, so that's our potential. So what can you do? What does an energy efficient building look like? Well, an office building, and this again, when I said earlier, to think about it as a system. So think about your building as a system. So you want to have, I mean, we do have PV, some kind of renewable energy up there. I mean, this building actually has a green roof, which is really important. It's a way of, so the sun shines down on a building, and you could have that sun, the sun is heat, right? So the sun could either produce energy with PVs, or it could shine down and make your building hotter. Or if you have a green roof, it could just grow plants. So it's thinking about the building as a system as a whole. So if you have a green roof, you're actually not only going to be creating more CO2 sinks, so those plants all suck in CO2, right? So that's a really good thing. So rather than having your building produce more CO2, you're actually sucking in more of that CO2. So having a green roof is a really cool thing. So there's a green roof up here, and then they have this whole thing is all of their ductwork, so you have this way of getting all of oh, I'm not going to explain that. So you have a way of getting light in up here, but then also creating enough shading with this tree so that you're blocking the heat from the sun, but you're getting the light in, which is a really nice thing. You also have a rainwater catchment, so you have the rain that comes down. The rainwater comes in here, and it's actually used to partially cool the building. So you run the air through the rainwater in order to help cool down the building, because that rainwater stays at a lower temperature. So this is an energy efficient office building in your home. This is an energy efficient home. They have attic that's insulated. They have a little fan here that pulls out the heat. This is important for us in California, especially if you have cooling, to make sure that you have something like an attic fan that pulls out your heat. It will make such a difference. Even if you don't have cooling, it's a really great idea. We reduced our total temperature in our house. We can go from outside where it's like 117 degrees outside, and we'll come into our house and it'll be roughly 75, 78 degrees in our house because of everything that we've done in our house. And we have an attic fan, we have insulation. We don't have air conditioning. We have no air conditioning at all. So this is, as long as we keep our windows and doors shut, we have thermal windows, we have insulated windows, we have insulation throughout our walls. Now we have them on our floor underneath our house because it's Marin. We have all kinds of stuff all over our house that's made it really super energy efficient. And because of that, you get increased comfort. We also have energy efficient lights all over our house. So we've gotten new LED lights. Have you seen the LED lights? Anybody have them? You guys have them? Have you guys seen them? They're so cool. So these are LED lights. So how many people have the CFL? Do you know what a CFL is? How many people don't know what a CFL light is? Okay, compact fluorescent light, those little swirly pigtail lights? Okay, so those are actually use 75% less energy than the old-fashioned, hot, icky, round light bulbs. Those are really old. You guys shouldn't use those anymore. They're really old-fashioned. So the pigtail ones are much more efficient, but the LED ones are even more efficient than those pigtail ones, and they're really bright and they're really cool. So for the adults in the room, check them out. They have really nice bright light. It's almost like daylight. It's very, very nice light.
And they supposedly last forever.
They last forever. Yeah, it's a solid state technology, so they last forever. So it's very cool. So those are some of the things to do in your home. I'm just going to breeze through this. Do you guys have questions about other things you can do in your home? What are some of the things that you guys do in your homes that I didn't talk about? Yeah?
Conserve.
Conserve. That's great.
Just turn off the heat.
That's great. That's great. How many of you guys put on a sweater instead of turning it. Oh, good. That's awesome. That's great. So we wear a lot of sweaters in our house. But it's, you get used to it. It's not that big a deal. Okay. So, sustainable communities. I want to talk about this for a minute. So if I'm talking about a building, that's one thing. But then you have groups of buildings, and then you have thinking about where you place buildings. So I could put buildings around so that I could have, okay, here's my school. Whoops. Oh, that's a terrible school. Okay, there's my school, and then here's all my houses here. And then here's a big office building here. And then here's a big road here, a big freeway. Is that a good sustainable community? What do you think? Why not, Mia? Why not? No, it's a good answer. You're absolutely right. Why not? Why wouldn't this be a good sustainable community? Anybody else? Yeah.
You gotta pump water a further distance to get to everything.
You gotta pump water. Okay, that's good. What's another one? Yeah.
I don't know, like plants
Okay. Well, let's put in some plants just to make it nice. Yeah.
Because people who go to the school live in the houses, not in the office buildings.
Yes.
So if you put the houses in the middle, it would be shorter to everywhere.
You are brilliant. That's fantastic. Yes. Okay, that's one change I'm going to make right there. Okay. All right. What else am I going to do? What else is wrong with this picture? Yeah.
Move the street over so that they won't have to use crossing lights because the house is in front of school.
Very good. Another brilliant suggestion. I love it. That's awesome. Let's put it outside of the community so we don't have all of those greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants. There's all kinds of particulates that are coming out of those cars too, right? Yeah. We don't want them next. Is that a good place right there?
Yeah.
Right next to our school? You want to have a highway next to our school with all those particulates and stuff?
I put it on the other side of the...
How about if we put it right here? Where should I put stores and stuff? Yeah.
Near the freeway.
Near the freeway. Okay. But which side of the freeway should they put it on?
Well, the side that's closer to houses that people can walk.
Good job. I like it. So I'm missing something else here. How are the people going to get from their house to the school or to their office building or to the stores? Yeah.
Maybe a short hike.
A short hike? Okay, so what do I need to do? What do I need to put in here?
Like sidewalk.
Sidewalks. Good. Okay. So that's a sustainable community. So what we just went through was a planning process. My organization actually goes through this kind of planning process. Yeah, do you have another question? Oh. There
Don't worry
it
about
is.
it.
Okay. Thanks. So that's what one of the things my organization does is actually works with cities to help them to plan where they put things, how they put things, how they can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in the city. And so we think about this with them. How can we put in more walking paths? How can we put in more biking paths? How can we do more so that people are using their cars less? Or how can we do it so that one of the things we often recommend actually is telecommuting so that people stay home on Friday. So they're not in their office buildings, they're at home, using the same energy that they probably normally use, maybe a little bit more with lights, but then they're not getting on the freeways and driving to their office buildings. So that's a really big greenhouse gas emission reduction, actually, right there. Okay, California is actually one of the top states in the country for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We're actually really, really good. We've been doing a lot of work for a long time on this, and we have some of the most innovative policies that are out there. Here's a list of them. I'm not going to go through them because it's a long list, but there's some really cool things in here. We have a cap and trade program that just started. Do you guys have any idea at all what a cap and trade program is? Yeah.
Is it when you buy those carbon, like you pay so that they get these carbon credits?
Yes.
And I don't totally get it.
You're right.
But that's like what
Yeah.
I'm supposed to say.
No, that's right, Mia.
Like there's a limit on how much energy you can use, and if you have extra, you can trade it or sell it.
Yeah, very good. Fantastic. That's awesome. So, this one company here is really polluting a lot, and they're putting all kinds of junk into our atmosphere, and it's really bad. Then there's another company over here that's really good, and they're super efficient, and they've been doing a great job for a long time. So what they do is they actually get credit for being really good, and they sell their credits to that really bad company. Otherwise, that really bad company has to pay a fine, has to pay a lot of money to the state. So it's a way to trade your goodness. What you really want to do, because this company still has to buy those credits, what you really want to do is get that company to become good too. And that's pretty much what's happening in California. I mean, we are really pretty good. All right. So my company, I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about me and my company, and just talking about some of the things that we do, just to give you an idea as you head into your futures, some of the things that you guys could be doing as you head in. So my organization, one of the things that we did, in particular that I did, was to start the Marin School of Environmental Leadership, which is here at Terra Linda High School. And it's a great program. We have a lot of project-based learning. The reason why we got involved with it, we do a lot with education. And one of the reasons that Taryn and Nathan know a lot is because I've been in their classroom teaching them. So my company has come into all of the elementary schools, all of the middle school, not Venetia Valley, but actually we were in Venetia Valley. We ran the Cool the Earth program at Venetia Valley. So if any of you are from Venetia Valley, so that was one of our programs that we did. And then also, we just have done a lot of education in the schools. We do green teams, we do all kinds of stuff. The reason why we do it is because what you all are going to face as you get into adulthood, we actually have no idea in terms of the climate crisis. We have no idea exactly the kinds of things. We can make all kinds of predictions. We can say, this is what we're going to need to do, and this is what could be happening, but we really don't know exactly what's going to happen. So we need to create entrepreneurs, we need to create innovators, we need to create all of you to be able to do that fifth R, to be able to rethink and respond to this climate crisis in ways that can help to address that. So it's really important. It's a super important thing, and that's why we are involved in education. We also do a lot of work in colleges and universities. So we work with actually every UC college and every state school in California, doing green campus kind of work, green dorms, all kinds of different things like that. We have different green job programs that we run. Here's a list. So one of the programs that we run, I'm just going to touch on a couple, and then you guys can ask questions if you want to. So the first one is the Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Fund. So one of the problems with communities being able to actually implement some of these programs that we're talking about, so doing energy efficiency or doing solar, what do you think the biggest problem is for them? What's the the biggest thing that these guys would face? I want to get one of the kids to answer, especially ones that aren't paying as much of attention. Yes. Money. He gets it before you guys do. Come on. You guys are getting extra credit. Are you getting extra credit for this? You should get like 1,000,000 points for this. Way more than these guys. Money. So how are these guys going to pay for this? I mean, that's a really big deal. Especially now with our economic crisis, cities are really, really strapped for money. They're firing people, they're laying people off, they're not able to pay firemen and police. How are they going to put solar on their rooftops? It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So we created this, the Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Fund. Marinwood Community Services District is one of the ones that's participating. City of San Rafael is participating. Basically what we did is we created this way of being able to do a really detailed assessment for them for free. They pay us back when they implement the project, only when they implement the project. And we've been able to line up different financing mechanisms to be able to help them to implement. But since we're not attached to any company, any one solar company, we can actually help them figure out what the best way to do that. And I'm telling you in this in part because as you're heading into college and as you're heading into kind of the workforce, to think beyond traditional avenues of going into the workforce. If you're interested in science, doesn't mean you just have to do research. There's all kinds of other things that are available for you guys too. So there's lots and lots of different avenues that you can get into from this, from sustainable energy and all kinds of different stuff. Another one that we did, Sunshot Initiative, is where we looked at all of the different policies and things in a city that are blocking cities from actually implementing solar or energy efficiency within their cities. And we developed this whole website. So again, there's a whole other kind of career path in web development. We developed this whole website that was interactive, that enables cities to say, okay, this is the ordinance that I have, this is the law that I have right now, and I can't figure out how to change that law so that I can open it up to have more solar on our rooftops. And so we created a system where they just point and click, and they can rewrite their laws for their city based on the information that we give them. So it's kind of cool. And there's a lot of other things. We've actually worked with just about every affordable housing unit in Marin County. We worked with some of the Marin Cell students last year on that too, which was fun. And that's it. We also helped, I don't know how many of you guys knew that Terra Linda went solar? Did you guys know it? So Terra Linda went solar. They have solar that supplies all of the hot water for the pool. So we were able to do that. We got a large grant from PG&E and from Marin Community Foundation last year, and they installed solar panels by the pool, which is really cool. So we're going to do a celebration at some point. I don't know when. I don't think we have that on the books yet. But we're going to do a really fun celebration coming up. It'll be fun. I kind of went through this some. I think that one of the things that I really like to leave this message, this is Albert Einstein said this, that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use to create them. And that's where I get that whole rethink thing. If we try and solve problems, like ethanol is a really good example of that, where we're in an energy crisis, where we're using too much oil, we're going to war over oil. So let's create a new energy source. And ethanol, theoretically, is a good solution to that. Do you guys know what ethanol is? So ethanol is corn. Just grow corn, and then you have it go through all kinds of processes, and you create a fuel out of the corn. Right? It's like you can create high fructose corn syrup, or you can create corn oil, or you can create but you create ethanol. Right? So you can create ethanol out of corn. Actually takes more energy to grow and process that corn than the energy you actually get out of it. And so that's a good example of using the same kind of thinking we've always used to try and solve a problem, but what we ended up doing was creating a bigger problem.
Wait, so it's like not better for the environment?
Ethanol is not, depends on how it's produced. Corn-based ethanol, no, it's not better for the environment. If you use biomass, so biomass is when you take like old sticks and woods from forests and you gather it up and then you can create ethanol from that, that can be better for the environment. But because people are growing corn and using fertilizer to grow the corn and then getting these tractors out, and it's not. All right, questions? Do you guys have questions for me? Yeah.
What's biodiesel?
Biodiesel?
Is that like, can you you see and hear about these buses, like some city has become, made its bus completely biodiesel. Is that like, using Kentucky Fried Chicken or something to run it, or?
Probably not. It is. So diesel is another petroleum product. Biodiesel is making it out of like corn oil or some other form of an oil, soy oil. So it could be Kentucky Fried Chicken. The best biodiesel comes from sushi. Actually, sushi restaurants make the cleanest oil. Go figure. Don't know why. But yeah, biodiesel is a good solution. You're still getting particulates when you're burning biodiesel. So it's still a fossil fuel. It's not a fossil fuel. It's still a fuel source that's carbon based. So you're still emitting carbon dioxide and other particulates by burning. So you're still burning. I mean, that's why. I mean, one of the best sources is an electric car where you're recharging with the solar panel. That's a really good. So everybody should go out and buy a Tesla.
Or a Bolt. Or a Leaf.
I have a Tesla. I'm sorry. I covet a Tesla. Taryn, any questions that you have?
No.
Yeah, anything else you want to share that I missed?
I think you're going to do a good job of explaining everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
You did.
Fracking.
We're answering other questions first, and then we'll go fracking.
Could you talk a little bit about diesel-powered mass transportation? A lot of people in Marin voted against rail coming through here because it was diesel-powered, even though it was going to be probably very efficient at getting people off 101. What do you think of that project?
I supported it. So, I mean, in general. So, when you think about any kind of public transportation, so if you have a bus with a driver and then one person in it, what's the difference between that and a car? Ooh, that's a nice car, isn't it? With a driver and a passenger.
Bus takes more fuel, no?
Yes. Depends on the number of passengers you have. So if you have this big, huge diesel train and you have 10 passengers in it, it's much better to have a bus or to have cars, frankly. So you have to look at the math. It all depends on the math. Diesel fuel is actually, in a lot of ways, it's better than gasoline because it's a cleaner. You use more of the energy from diesel than you do, but you also are producing more particulates. You're not producing more. You reduce the number of greenhouse gas emissions, but you're producing more particulates, so the stuff that you're breathing in and creating problems for your lungs.
It was originally designed as a plant fuel, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it is a plant fuel, but then it became more of yes, it was originally a plant fuel. And it's becoming now more and more people are going back to biodiesel. Willie Nelson's a good example of that. Other questions? Yeah.
I was curious about the subsidies. All the other ones are being subsidized, and or maybe you could tell us the history of, because there were some subsidies and then they were taken away for green energy.
There's still subsidies for green energy. Yeah.
So is it valuable in your mind to try to subsidize green energy and alternative energy sources, or is it better to, because subsidies are a problem with oil and a problem with all the others, would it be a problem someday for green, or what's your
Absolutely.
feeling on that?
I think you need to wean off of subsidies. Do you guys understand what subsidies are now? Okay. So you need to wean off of subsidies, and we actually did that. The California Solar Initiative no longer offers a rebate for solar. I think they did it too soon. I think they still should offer rebates for solar, but they no longer offer a rebate for residential solar. Is that a good thing? I mean, basically, the cost per watt, so the cost per installed solar panel, went down and down and down, and now it got to a point where they felt like it was market, the market could support it, and it is. Solar is more popular now than it's ever been. So it's definitely gotten to a point it's reached that tipping point where people are buying more of it because it makes sense for them. Do I think that it should still be getting subsidies? I think it's always a good idea to give a little bit of subsidy, just to give, because, you know, people like coupons. They like that little oomph. Should big oil companies be getting the kind of subsidies that they're getting? No, definitely not. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a balance, because if we just got rid of their subsidies, our economy would collapse. We need to wean ourselves off of our dependence on oil, and as we wean ourselves, we need to also be weaning ourselves off of those subsidies. So it's a balance. Yeah.
When you hear about these discussions of subsidies for oil, they made the exact same discussion of all of the exact same technologies, solar, oil, ethanol, in the 1970s. And when we listened to science seminars in the 1970s, they were exactly the same discussion, and the subsidies were taken away, and oil became very cheap, and none of this stuff got going. So you have to have the subsidy go to get the technology to go, and if oil gets very cheap, suddenly everything evaporates.
And where I think that the subsidies really should be is in technology and research. I think it should be we should be inventing new technologies that are renewable. I mean, right now we have thin film solar that's not really out in the market. That's a really good viable option. We have these silicon panels that most of you have seen that sit up there, but they cost a lot of energy to make, and they're actually they pollute too. So there's a lot of impact from these solar panels. The thin film doesn't have as much impact, but they're not as much out there because the research isn't there to support them yet. So we need to get more money into research and development, I think. Yeah.
So once you decide, okay, yeah, I want to get solar panels, that was my next question. Like, how do you make sure that they were made in a way that was not using gobs of energy and caustic materials, and you know what I mean? Where do you go to find that kind of stuff?
That's a good question, and I honestly don't know. If I was going to be looking at that, I would do my research. I'd go on the web and I'd look. Unfortunately, a lot of the panels right now are made in China.
That's what I keep
That's
hearing
where most of them are made. There are some made in the United States, and there are some made in Europe, but most of them are made in China, and a lot of them, unfortunately, are made in factories that are not clean or unsafe. I mean, we just heard about I don't know if anybody heard about the factory in Bangladesh that was producing all this clothing for Walmart, and 112 people died because their emergency exits didn't open. Yeah, it was awful. So it's that kind of stuff that we're facing when we're supporting. I mean, that's when, you talk about subsidies. That's basically what we're doing when we're buying a lot of products from China. When we're buying all this stuff. Anyway, don't get me going on that. Yeah.
I can answer that question. It's called LEED certification.
Yeah.
L-E-E-D. And you look for LEED products, and then they have various levels.
Do they have for products? For solar panels?
For building products.
Okay.
Almost all building products.
Yeah, I know for building products, but for, I guess...
If it's a panel that's going on a building,
okay.
There
Good.
ought to be
Thank you.
A LEED certified.
Yeah, I took out all my lead slides from them because it's good. You know a lot about LEED. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hey, I sometimes think when I want to buy fruit from Chile in the middle of winter, because I've all gotten used to having summer fruits and stuff, and then I think about that bunch of grapes riding in a ship, steaming out stuff from 5,000 miles and stuff. Is there any discussion of you being able to look at a product and finding out what it's,
You can, actually. If you go into Whole Foods or Safeway, it says where it's from. It says on the little sticker, it says Chile or Argentina or wherever. I mean, that's actually an activity I do a lot with students, is to get them to trace. Midsole students, you guys did that. Amber, you want to talk about that from last year, what you guys did with the local foods? Any of the Midsole students that were there last year?
We were given like food and like the mileage, and then we looked at the maps and we calculated how much CO2 it produced from like one trip across, because it was so many miles, and it was sad to look at.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, when you're thinking about, should I get an apple from Washington or a peach from Argentina, choose that apple from Washington. It's closer. But really, what you should be doing is just looking at what's in season and getting get a persimmon instead, which is same season, but it's local. So you should always be thinking about local foods. That's a really important thing. Going to your farmer's market is important. you can have a negative impact if you're making multiple trips to your farmer's market by car. If you're riding your bike or walking, like to the local Marin wood market, it's a big difference. I mean, you have to take into account the transportation miles. It's all about thinking as a system, not just thinking about that one thing you're getting. And that's another thing about China. You know, that's a long way for stuff to come. It's a really long way. So buying local is really important. Good question. Any other questions?
Well, Cyane, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a little goodie bag for you, and it's recycled bags. And I don't know, I think it's local. Everything's from California.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And ladies and gentlemen, next week we had to change. The pediatrician's daughter got sick, and it's not a joke. It really happened. Like she broke her humerus. So instead, we're going to
funny.
Not funny. So we're going to have Dr. Art here tomorrow, next week with one of his colleagues in computers, robots, and medical education. Oh my! And there's a warning: people with heart disease should not sit in the front row. There may be some robotic things present. Hello. Good morning. Everybody's heart is okay? Art, you might have to spring into action. So I was turning it off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's next week, and if you have something that needs to be signed, you can bring it to Art or me, or maybe even Mr. Harvey.